Welcome everyone to Distance Lesson Design. This is based on neuroscience, and it's a four-step process of things to think about to really make it simple for you in this time when many of us are beginning distance learning for the first time. So you may know exactly what it looks like to plan a lesson for the classroom, a lesson, a unit, etc., for the physical classroom, but now we're talking about virtual classrooms. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I'll go ahead and share my slides so we can go ahead and get started. Feel free as you're watching this to do what you need to do. If you need to stand up, pause the video, stand up, walk around for a moment, come back, look away from the screen for a few seconds, not a problem. So feel free to, of course, pause as you need when that is the case. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here with our lesson design for distance learning. All right, so I will introduce myself briefly. My name is Catherine Goyette, and I am an Educational Technology and Integrated Studies Consultant with Tulare County Office of Ed. This is my 5th year in the job as of 2020-2021 school year, and work with a lot of teachers and administrators just like you who are watching, and really look forward to supporting teachers and districts in this shift that we were all not expecting, but are now called to do to support our students at this time, in the time of a global pandemic. So I like to know, people usually like to know what my role was prior to the job at the county. I was a principal for 3 weeks. It was a summer school, so it was a 3-week program, and I loved it. Prior to that, I was a learning director for a couple years, and then prior to that, I taught kinder, 1st, 2nd, 5th, and 6th. And actually taught some music classes prior to even public school teaching as well. So excited to be here. This is an email address that you can contact me at any time. Please feel free to do that. I also have some resources here on this website, wonderexplorelearn.com. Please feel free to check that out for some quick tip GIFs and other resources as well. There is a remote distance learning page that has a link to some pre-made lesson plans for ideas for you and other resources as well, video tutorials and the like. I do want to let you know that you can have access to this presentation and others with this bit.ly here. So go ahead and type this into your address bar, bit.ly/2 capital C 98 lowercase q capital S, capital W. It does need to be, it is case sensitive, so you have to be careful of that. So this is your mission with this video, to begin to ideate on, design what may be a distance learning lesson, or perhaps a distance learning series of lessons or unit based on neuroscientific principles. So I do want to let you know before we begin that this is based on neuroscience. This is based on brain research. Decades ago at Stanford, there was research done, action research designed to find out how can we support students with special needs and increase their accessibility for learning. Now we have, based on this research, based on how the brain works, as we learned through all of that research, there is now what's called a Universal Design for Learning framework. And if you click right here on udlguidelines.cas.org or type that into your address bar, you can see all of the information with the framework, etc., all of the research. But this is really based on all of this, and while many of these strategies are necessary for some students, they are truly beneficial to all. The first networks of the brain that we want to look at is the affective networks for the why of learning, the engagement. This is about purpose, motivation. What do students feel about the learning? Do they feel that they are able to move forward and are excited about what you are actually instructing them on? Do they feel it is relevant? Do they have confidence and have self-efficacy? That is what this portion is. This next one in the recognition networks is the principle of multiple means of representation, and that is the what of learning. So that's more like if the why, the affective networks, is kind of like the heart, then the what is kind of like the input to the brain. So is that content that you are having me explore, is it accessible to me, or is there a barrier that needs to be addressed? And then the final networks, the strategic networks that we work on in UDL, is the how of learning. And so that is, I now have some learning, I had some input into my brain. Do I have the ability to now express my learning? How do I make sure that I'm able to express that learning, so to speak? So this is the basis of what everything is designed around. And so again, feel free to check out this website if you'd like to learn more. So we have some synchronous and asynchronous opportunities for our students when we are at a distance, and both are very important. First is the synchronous, and that's like a video call where all of us are on the same call at the same time. And so this is like a Zoom or a Google Meet or a Teams meeting, whatever it may be in your district. Now, asynchronous makes me think a little bit like back in the day, I used AOL Instant Messenger. When I was in high school, the internet had just kind of come into the mainstream, so to speak, a bit. And so I was one of the fortunate ones that did have a computer at home, belonged to my parents, and we had the modem and the phone line, and it would take forever, but I wanted to get online so that I could chat with my friends on AOL IM, Instant Messenger. And so the challenge was I did not know when they would be online. I did not know when I would be able to be online because we only had one phone line, and my parents may be expecting an important phone call and I wouldn't be allowed to go online. So what I would have wanted is something that is more asynchronous, something that is just like what you are watching right now, where you can watch on your own time, kind of like Netflix or Hulu or that sort of a platform, as opposed to live network TV. And so our asynchronous is very important because if you see these icons here, there may be some barriers for our students. Some people, some students may have unreliable internet or not have internet at all. Perhaps at certain times of the day they don't have that. Perhaps they're sharing devices with siblings. And so it's important that we have the synchronous and also those asynchronous environments and opportunities for our students. Now, we want to make sure that when we are designing a learning lesson, that even though I'm an ed tech consultant, I am a teacher first. I teach students, and it's about learning, not about cool tech tools. So what I'd like you to do first is think about what is a learning goal that you would like to think of as we go through this process. So I'd like you now to think of that. Go ahead and you're going to pause the recording and take some notes on what is it that you would like your students to learn. Welcome back. So now we're going to look at the basis of the distance learning lesson design. So the first step is to set the stage. We'll talk a bit about that. This is really important because we need to make sure that we make a personal connection with the students, even if it is asynchronous. And we also need to make sure that we are setting the stage and letting kids know what is to come. Secondly is content. This is really based on the multiple means of representation principle of UDL. And so it's going to activate the recognition networks. And the way that we do that is making sure we have multiple means of representation of this content. So that's the second thing we're going to think about. The third is collaboration. Many times at a distance, we know collaboration is important, but we don't know quite how to do that, particularly in an asynchronous environment. And so this is going to help activate the affective networks of the brain, help students build upon their understanding and better remember their learning. And so we'll talk a bit about that. And finally, we have synthesized learning. This is, how do I make sure that my students, all from a distance, all of these portions, these buckets, topics, so to speak, are from a distance? And how do I make sure that from a distance, my students have the ability to express their learning in more than one way, based on what their strengths are, based on what their needs are, so that I can ensure I am being accessible to my students. Now, this can work in both a flipped learning environment, meaning that perhaps you provide some content for students asynchronously first, and then you meet and discuss it in a synchronous environment. Or this can also work in a more direct model where perhaps as a teacher, you give a quick mini lesson and model something, and then students go on their own to practice those skills before coming back. So there are definitely different ways that this can work. This is meant to be a flexible and fluid model that is designed to be a structure that helps you think about what are important things to include in a distance learning lesson design. And so be sure that you make this work for you. It is meant, again, to be flexible and fluid, because what we do not want is a one-size-fits-all approach. However, when we are first-year teachers at a distance, so to speak, we may have been teaching for many years, but we are most all of us, are teaching from a distance for the first time, at least for the first time at the beginning of a year. And that being said, we want to make sure that we plan more than we had in the past, because this is different and new for us. As a first-year teacher, I pre-planned so many things. I pre-planned all of those checks for understanding, which is going to go in this content area, that documenting thinking of content. I pre-planned so much, and then as I continued to teach, that lessened. So that will happen with you as well, as we learn how to do this and have that experience. I have a couple of lesson plan templates for your reference. If you go to this bit.ly again to access this presentation, on these slides, if you click on this image, it will take you, as you can see, to this document. You'll need to click File and make a copy if you would like to have your own to write on. But this is something where you can take notes as you are working through your lesson idea. There's also, on the next slide, a slides example. And so if you click on this image, you will see this in Google Slides. Now, some teachers really like this because they'll take off perhaps this first slide when they send it to their students, but they will keep these slides here and they will populate them with things to put in their lesson. So for example, and you could do this as well if you have PowerPoint and Microsoft Office 365, you could create this in PowerPoint and send it on Teams. But if you're using slides, you can create this in slides for your students based on these components, and then send it, make a copy for each student in Google Classroom. So if you were to design this within Google Slides, perhaps on this first one, you would actually put a video of yourself explaining the agenda, saying hello. Perhaps you would actually have a copy of an agenda here. Maybe here you would actually embed some links to some text, to some videos, to some images for students to do. Perhaps you direct them to a certain page of a textbook that went home, a novel that went home, etc. Perhaps in this portion, and you can of course add more slides. Maybe you're going to have some collaboration within some of this content area, and then you'll go back to more of these content slides. But again, if this is the way that you would like to use to do some lesson planning, many teachers really like to do it that way. Okay, so we're going to start with our first step here, set the stage. Now, it is so important, particularly in a time where there is a global pandemic and quite a bit of stress in our midst. And so as such, it's so important that we make connections with our students, that we have opportunities for them to see us. Khan Academy and Bill Nye the Science Guy, those are great, but they're not you. Your teacher, you are the teacher, and your students need you. When students come into your classroom, in a physical classroom, you typically say, hey, I'm so happy you all are here. This is what we're going to do today. Maybe you'll say, we're going to continue reading our novel so that we can prepare for our essay that is due next week. And then we're going to have some opportunity to talk about it as well. So you're letting them know what is to come. And of course, you're beginning by making that connection and saying, greeting them. Greeting them at the door is a great thing to do. Since we cannot greet them at the door, so to speak, we certainly want to be able to welcome them. Now, this can be done either in a synchronous learning space, such as Google Meet or Zoom, or it could also, if that's not possible for you, you could also record a video and use that previously recorded video to send to students. Again, this can be done synchronously or asynchronously, and there's a few different tools you can use for whichever you choose to do here. Now, again, it's so important that students know what to expect. You're setting the stage. You're saying these are the expectations and what we are going to do. When students have gone through trauma and or are stressed, if just all of us in this way, people that feel stressed and or have endured trauma often feel out of control. And so what we learn is that routines are very, very helpful for mental health, for our emotional well-being, and for the ability to be present. And so having those routines and those expectations are very helpful. So here is one example. You can find this on ditchthattextbook.com. Matt Miller has compiled a great amount of resources. This is just some ideas about some tips for video calls. You may have some, you may like these or like some different ones. Here's some more examples. This is from one of our Director of Technology here in our area at Tulare Joint Union High School District. And so if you like these are some other options as well. So think through what those norms you would like. You can, of course, rewind and look at this again, look on the slide deck and take a moment to think about that. You can, of course, pause the video and really take some time delving into what you would like your norms for your classroom to be as well. So again, so important that you share yourself with your students, whether it is a pre-recorded video, as you see here, this video was embedded into a Google slide and somebody is watching it, or if it's something you do in a synchronous space. Also so important that we make sure that the kids know the protocol. They know where to find information. They know what to do. We do not want students spending so much time cognitively trying to figure out what the directions are, where they're supposed to find information, that they shut down and they don't get to the content. And so it's very, very important that we make the processes extremely simple. Being organized is very helpful. So if you have Google Classroom, for example, having topics can be very helpful. This GIF here, this is one of the quick tip GIFs that you will find on wonderexplorelearn.com under the quick tips menu. This shows you how to create topics. Now, topics in Google Classroom are great for organization. In multiple subject classrooms in the past, I recommended many teachers had an ELA topic, a math topic, etc. And even in those classrooms, I would be in those classrooms and sometimes kids would say, wait a minute, I can't find that. Can you show me where it is? And ask their teacher to show them where it is. We need it simple now. So I spoke with a couple of teachers in the spring when distance learning began, and they changed the way they made their topics so that it was by week. So students know in this topic that has this particular week, all of my information from that week is there. So organization is very helpful. This is another idea. If you go to slidesmania.com, there are absolutely free templates that you can check out and make a copy and use and edit as you need. So this way, this is an entire week all in Google Slides. And so the students know this is the protocol. This is setting the stage. This is saying, as always, make sure you go to your slides. You're going to check out Mondays. Today is Monday. Make sure that you watch the video. Maybe you always have a video. Maybe you always have some text here. Whatever it may be, it's all color coded. But the idea is everything is in one place, and that's really going to help with the students. Maybe you have older students and you're going to have kind of a hyperdoc, so to speak, here, where you have a few things for students to do during the week, and it's all on one document with hyperlinks here where they can click and go somewhere else. And so this again is another way that you'd set the stage. And what you would want to do is, whether it's in a synchronous call and you let kids know, okay, I just want you to know that for this week's lesson, you're going to go here and you're going to look at this document, and then you're going to explain what they will be doing. Or perhaps you make a pre-made video and it's a video they watch and you're explaining what the expectations are there. So how do we get students engaged in synchronous learning? We know, number one, that as they are, if we're setting the stage and we're having them even learn the instructions, they're learning the protocols. We know that if our standards are over here, and this is taken from CASP, the California Assessment Program, they have this graphic and our standards are here and we have these annual assessments and weekly, but our students, the best way that we as teachers have an impact on our students to impact their learning is minute by minute. And so how do we do that? If we are, whether we are in a call with them or we have them in a pre-recorded video, how do we do that? Well, here's some ideas. You can, if you're using Zoom or Google Meet and you ask students, please tell me, write on your whiteboard, write on your piece of paper with a marker, write how many sentences you will need to write today. And then they put up their whiteboard on the camera and you can see at a glance. It's a great way to do this. You could also use colored pieces of paper, or I had some students, some teachers that said they were gonna make a piece of paper that had a thumb up and a thumb down. And so kids can show if they do understand what you are expecting of them. If students are watching a pre-recorded video, you can be just like Sesame Street, who was revolutionary, and though it was a virtual learning experience, Sesame Street asks a question and stops before moving on. Tell students, I want you to pause the video and write down what I asked you to do. So this is a really important thing as well. If you want students to turn in those notes for you, these are 3 videos on YouTube that you may share with your students. Send them to these videos and it will show them, if you're using Google Classroom, how they can turn in an image of that handwritten work. On pre-recorded videos, make sure they're short and sweet. A typical length is 1 minute per grade level, a quick little mini lesson, a quick little welcome and introduction to what is to come. Super helpful to keep it short. You could always, if you do go longer than a minute per grade level, make sure that you ask them to stop and do something. Really important that students are actively engaged. I highly recommend that all of your pre-recorded videos go on YouTube, and the reason is because on YouTube, there are built-in accessibility features. So your students can turn on closed captioning. They can translate that closed captioning to one of over 200 languages, and they can slow down the playback speed. This is great for English learners as well as students with auditory processing disorders, and students are very familiar with YouTube. This is a video tutorial that you may share with students in order to teach them how to use these accessibility tools that I just mentioned. Again, if you put this bit.ly here, this address, into your address bar, case sensitive, you'll have access to this presentation where you will have all of these resources. All right, so if you are not familiar with how to upload a video to YouTube, they will prompt you to create a channel. You just answer a couple of questions, and then you're all set. So these screenshots here show you how to do just that, how to upload a video to YouTube. This second one you're not really going to worry about because that's for those that are trying to promote their video and what they're doing. You can have your video be public or unlisted. Private won't work because only you with your email address and password are able to see the video, and you certainly do not want your students to have your email address and password. Unlisted means that it is not searchable, so you can use that if you would like it to be a little bit more private from the public, so to speak. If you're making videos on your phone or tablet, make sure you use landscape mode. This is something called Screencastify, screencastify.com. There are other screencasting apps as well, but make sure that when you're doing that, you still have, if it is possible, a picture of your face as you are speaking. The reason is this helps with comprehension, both for students that are English learners and perhaps students with auditory processing disorders. They will be watching your facial expressions. All right. Also, I would recommend that you ask students to like and subscribe. Here's the reason. If you have students that are struggling with motivation, struggling to remember to check their Google Classroom, their Microsoft Teams, what if they subscribe to your YouTube channel? If they have notifications turned on, they will get a notification on their phone or their device every time you publish a new video, and that may prompt them to go watch it. I know a couple of teachers that said that worked for them. If you are helping kids know the protocols of your lesson, how to access things by recording your screen, you can go into your accessibility settings on your computer and you can emphasize your cursor so it's a lot bigger. Remind students they can repeat the video. They can go back if they need to see it again. Typically, students use YouTube for entertainment, and so this is a great way to make sure that they know it's different when I'm using it for learning. And again, one more thing you can do with pre-recorded videos is a program called EdPuzzle. So if you use EdPuzzle, you can do checks for understanding because you can take a video that is either pre-made or that you upload, and you can embed questions for your students. This does integrate with Google Classroom. Edpuzzle.com is where you would go to check that out. Embed some questions, and if you use multiple choice questions, the great part is EdPuzzle will grade it for you automatically. This talks a little bit more about EdPuzzle, and what I'd like you to do now is think about for your lesson, what is it that you will want to do to set the stage? How will you organize content? How will you say hello to your class and make sure that they are clear on what you are asking them to do, what those expectations are? So you'll go ahead and pause the video and think about, for your lesson, how will you set the stage? All right, so let's go ahead now and talk about the second thing we think about when we are designing a neuroscientifically based distance learning lesson or unit, and that is the content. We want to make sure that this content is accessible to all of our students and that they can also have a way that they can document their thinking regardless of their developmental level. And so there are many different ways that we can provide access to content for our students. I'd like to show you some examples of additional ways that you can find content for your students. The first one, if you click on this, again, if you go to this bit.ly, you'll have access to this presentation. So when you click on this, it will take you to a document that has a lot of different resources based on these portions of the lesson that you are creating. So for example, if you are looking for some ebooks that are free for you and your students, Epic is a great one. And if you click on that, it will take you to that website where you can learn more about it. And these are largely, there's at least a free version if they are not 100% free, all of these resources here. Perhaps you want some text sets, you may want to try Newsela. Perhaps you wanted to have a lot of images, videos, and you want to search by standard. This explains that PBS Learning Media is a great place to go for that. So this is some additional places for you to find content for your students. Now, also, I want to direct you to this Distance Learning Resources home page here, because if you click on that, if you click on this, it's going to take you to a website. This first one shows technology platform support, but if you go to the home and you go to, or if you go to grade levels, maybe you teach 3rd grade, you will see all sorts of different subject areas, as well as special education and social emotional learning. So maybe you decide, I want to look for some English language arts resources. And so now as you look through it, you can say, well, look at this. This is videos of celebrities reading to kids. That's pretty cool. Oh, look, story time from space. Astronauts reading to my students. That's pretty neat. All sorts of different resources here that you can check out. Every single resource on this website is free. It was designed and developed and all of these resources were vetted from multiple departments at Tulare County Office of Education. And again, 100% free, lots of great resources on here, and this website is continually being refined. Okay, so that's one place where you can find the content. Now, how are you going to get the content to your students? Well, you may have seen these Bitmoji Classrooms lately. This is one that a colleague of mine created. And so essentially, you're going to take, and there's a lot of these templates free on Facebook. There's these Facebook groups for Bitmoji Classrooms. You can look that up. There's also lots of great tutorials online. So look up Virtual Bitmoji Classroom and you will find some how-tos. But essentially what this does is anywhere on here, if the student clicks on it, it's going to take them to something. There's hyperlinks. Many teachers will change this to the date. So if I'm over here and I click this graphic novels as a student, then my teacher led me to a collection of novels that I can read, a collection of graphic novels. And so what's great about that is it's giving kids multiple ways, multiple choices on what they can read based on their preferences. And so that's activating them for their motivation. But you can also use some videos, some read-to-me's, some things like that in order to make sure that you are being accessible for your students. It is also helpful to have opportunities for options. If you don't want to use that Bitmoji Classroom idea, you can use, we talked a little bit about the HyperDoc idea. You could do this in slides and hyper slides. So here's a 2nd grade example. It has books, one to read, one's a read to me, some videos, some virtual reality. What you could say as a teacher is, I want you to choose one from each category. But the fact that you're giving the kids choice is going to help them to become expert learners of what works best for them. It increases motivation and increases accessibility because they have multiple ways of accessing the content. These are some other examples of these learning menus, so to speak. Here's from our math department, from our ELD, English Language Development department. And it's nice to have screen-free options as well, where kids can go off screen, do something, and then take a picture of that work to then send you digitally. Making sure that we have those multimedia options, we have some screen-free choices. That's great for those students that the icons on the right here, maybe they're struggling with internet access, device access. If we have multimedia options, maybe some read to me, that's really gonna help those that are struggling for understanding. Perhaps they have some special needs. What if students have speak a different language? Could we have translation options for them? Could we teach them how to use Google Translate? That may increase accessibility as well. And we want to make sure that students have an opportunity to document their change of thinking, to take notes as well. So what are ways that we can do that if students are not yet writers, or they struggle with writing, or that gives them a great deal of anxiety, and we're not right there in front of them to reassure them and encourage them? Could they potentially use images? And so one way that students can do this is called sketch notes. Now, to begin this, you may say, well, I still want kids to write down some notes. I still want them to write some certain things. Then what you could say is, you know, I know some of you are great artists, and if you would like to add some sketches that connect with what we're learning next to your notes, I'd love to see those. And so in doing this, you may motivate some kids that weren't perhaps as motivated before. Images, we know, are proven to increase our memory of new learning. You can click here if you'd like to watch a webinar about sketchnoting from Sylvia Duckworth, who has written several books on sketchnoting for teachers and for students. This is another great tool if you haven't checked it out. Jamboard, just go to jamboard.google.com. If it says you don't have access in your domain, contact your IT administrator and they can get that opened up for you. It's a relatively new app, and so some districts just didn't know about it and hadn't opened it up yet. But it can be done collaboratively. Kids can take notes in there as well. So I want you to, in a moment, you're going to pause the video and take some notes on these questions. How will students access the content that you would like them to comprehend? How will they document their learning? And then how will you provide feedback? So what about collaboration? How do we make collaboration work from a distance? So certainly important, as we know that as students are, you know, in order for them to feel connected to content, they build their understanding if they're connected with others and they have opportunity to speak to one another. Here's one example of how students used a tool called Flipgrid, which I'll talk about in a moment, to fit into an entire learning sequence. You want to make sure that this collaboration isn't separate, but fits into your learning plan. And so these students watched a video where the teacher explained something. Then there was an overall question. Students read a text, wrote down ideas and things on a graphic organizer, and then had specific instructions on collaborating via video discussion platform on Flipgrid. And this can be done asynchronously. The students do not all need to be on at the same time. So we want to make sure that the students are collaborating about content and that it is a part of their learning journey with this particular topic. So there are different ways to do this. We can use Flipgrid, which I'll show you in a moment. We can create a question in Google Classroom where students can reply to each other. And so if you click on this image, it will take you to a YouTube video that shows you how to do just that. If you are using Zoom, or Google Meet is coming out with this soon as well, is Breakout Rooms. So synchronously, kids can talk to each other in their own video room, so to speak. So if you wanted to do Breakout Rooms, the first thing you have to do is go to your settings and turn it on. Otherwise, you will not be able to do this. This will work on the free version of Zoom as well. Once you do that, you're going to have this icon here when you have a live Zoom you're hosting that says Breakout Rooms, and you can assign participants automatically, randomly into lots of different rooms. Now, if you would like to pre-assign breakout rooms, it's a little tricky, and so you will likely have glitches, and so I want you to know what this fine print is before you look into that. So here's Flipgrid. It looks like this. It feels like social media to the students, and so they feel like They're motivated. They are able to add stickers and emojis and things like that. And so it's a wonderful platform. It also has great opportunities for the teacher to manage it as much as they want. Maybe you want all the students to see each other's responses. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to approve them first. Maybe you do want them replying to each other with their own video. Maybe you don't. You get to choose all those things. And there's also accessibility built in with something called Immersive Reader, which is also built into many of the Microsoft products, actually, and is available on the Chrome Web Store. Immersive Reader is what it's called. It will say unofficial, but what it does, it's an extension for the Chrome Web Store. What this does is it will allow kids that if I speak in my native language and someone else speaks in another language and doesn't understand me, they can turn closed captioning on my video and then translate it to their home language. And so we can have a conversation as peers, even though we don't speak the same language. This talks a little bit about Flipgrid. It used to be called a grid, now it's called a group, so that one word will be slightly different, but everything else is very similar. It does integrate with multiple platforms such as Google Classroom. And again, that just talks a little bit more about Flipgrid. So what I want you to do is think on about your learning goal. And I want you to think about how will you have students collaborate? What's a way that you will allow students to work together to speak, to have maybe a written text collaborative conversation? How will you engage students in conversation? So pause the video and then take some notes on what are some collaborative opportunities you will provide students. So our final section to think about is our synthesized learning stage. And so this is where we provide students with different opportunities to demonstrate their learning. The more opportunities that we give them, the more motivated they will be and the more accessible it will be for each student. It addresses that learner variability. Now, I am not saying that you are telling them that they can choose, choose whatever format they want to teach you and let you know anything they learned in all of their life. You're still saying, I have these content standards and these are the questions that I want you to answer. But what you are saying is the way that you answer that is up to you. So what does this look like from a distance? What are some ideas on what this could be? Well, choice boards, learning menus can be really helpful for this. I will show you some examples in a moment. Allow students to explain in their home language. That's something that really addresses that self-confidence piece. It makes students feel comfortable when they're in this environment that is not normal. Learning from home is not normal for our students. And again, giving them multiple means of action and expression. Here's an example from our science department with some different ways that students could show what they know to express their learning. And again, if they choose a handwritten method, these videos will show them how they can take a picture of that handwritten work, whether it's a poster or it isn't some sort of a sketch note, so to speak, where they did respond to the academic prompts that you had, how they can turn that in a digital format by taking a picture and submitting it to Google Classroom. These choices are really key. When my son was a freshman in high school, he is not a big fan of English language arts. He likes other subject areas. However, for his final, the teacher said something like, well, you know, we read these texts during the year. Please choose 3, select a common theme between them, and then cite textual evidence that supports this theme with evidence of, you know, motif, maybe metaphor, you know, certain literary elements. So, you know, what happened was my son as a freshman was in a video editing class and he really enjoyed making videos. He was just learning how to do that. So for him, he created and edited a video for that class. He still answered all those content area questions. He addressed all of those things, but he was more motivated than I've seen him in any English language arts assignment before or since. So for you, What will this look like for you? What options might you give kids? What are you going to ask them to show that they know? Maybe you'll have some choices. If you have a choice board, so to speak, always have a section that says, or your idea, clear it with me, because they may have an idea you haven't thought of, and that will truly empower them. We don't want to just engage our students. We want to truly empower them in the learning process. We want them to feel motivated and purposeful. That is our goal. And so again, if you're doing those choice boards, make sure there is always an option for their idea. Take a moment. You can pause the video and consider and take some notes on what this will look like in your context. So you have now gone through and thought through 4 steps, so to speak, a structure to remind you of some great ways to ensure that you have neuroscientifically based strategies and components, I should say, in a distance learning lesson. I want to thank you for all you are doing. It is certainly a time where I applaud all teachers for moving forward with a lot of uncertainty and doing what is best for their students. You are learning new things, your students are learning new things, and I applaud you for being those lifelong learners. Feel free to email me with additional questions and check out wonderexplorelearn.com for even more resources. Thanks again and have a wonderful day. Like I said, feel free to reach out with any questions or for further support.